Democratic presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand compares being pro-life to being racist. Virginia state elections took place yesterday with a few surprising results, and a new poll shows how President Trump and Joe Biden fare nationally.
So Team Rising is here. Antjuan Seawright is a Democratic strategist. He previously served as senior advisor for the Hillary Clinton campaign in South Carolina. Sarah Selip is a publicist and CEO and founder of 917 Strategies. Welcome to you both. So let's take a listen to what Kirsten Gillibrand had to say the other day to the Des Moines Register about racism and abortion.
And so I believe that for all of these issues, they are not issues that there is a fair other side. There is no moral equivalency when you come to racism. And I do not believe there's a moral equivalency when it comes to changing laws that deny women reproductive freedom.
Antjuan, is that an appropriate thing for a Democratic candidate to say?
Well, let me say I subscribe to the Carter family values when Jay-Z says nobody wins when the family feuds. Therefore, I'm not here to beat up on her thought pattern, but I will probably say it a different way. When you look at in this country and you look at communities of color and you look at access to reproductive resources, no one can debate the fact that in black and brown communities, those resources are not as plentiful as in other communities. And so I would probably take that approach, and one could view that as racism. One could view that really as a true assault by the Republican Party on communities of color. But word for word, how she laid it out, Antjuan would probably disagree just a little bit.
Sarah, it is very insulting to people of faith, isn't it? To equate that people who believe in Christianity, which is a significant percentage of this population, and who also classify themselves as pro-life, I think 50% of the country, to equate them with the racists of the slavery age, that seems very inappropriate.
I mean, to be fair, it's just another one of those examples where it's Democrats not really liking one issue and just shutting it down completely. I mean, they disagree, they have no good talking points, and they'll just shut it down.
Well, I disagree a little bit because there are some moderate Dems who tend to be pro-choice. There are some moderate Dems who tend to be pro-life. I think you get
not in the Congress anymore.
You get a real mixed bag when you look at the big tent that makes up the Democratic Party. So I disagree a little bit, but no one can debate about the point I made earlier when it comes to access to reproductive resources in certain communities. And when you look holistically, I think at some of the policies that come from the Republican Party, one could argue that they tend to flirt, cuddle, and play footsie with racism.
Well, and let me say, I agree with you, Antjuan. I would not phrase this in the way Senator Gillibrand did. I don't think you want to draw that equivalency. However, when you're talking about forcing women who have been raped to bear their rapist baby, that's a moral issue. That is a moral issue.
I would classify that in the same remark as Kirsten Gillibrand's, right? It is a small minority of the pro-life community which is advocating for that type of legislation. I mean, the president himself came out.
It's law in Alabama, though.
You're right, but that's
I mean,
Alabama. That's one state, not every state.
And like voter suppression laws not too long ago, I believe that cancer is going to continue to grow within the Republican Party because it has come a real right meat tactic that is sexy to some parts of the Republican base.
The polling on that, in support of that, is so minuscule.
But
and many of them may live in Alabama, right, Sarah?
Yeah.
But not all of them. The pro-life community does not wholesale support what Alabama is trying to do.
No, absolutely not. I mean, you see it, and there's so many different factors, there's different contexts, everything from across the country. Like, what happens in Philly doesn't happen in Alabama as a whole. So you just have to take that into context and think, what are they doing for policy, and what are they creating that works for them in their community versus an inner city hospital.
But you and I both know when the Republicans do not want something, they will be loud and clear about what they do not want. So if your theory is true, then why were these people who believe, as you say, were not loud about what was going on in Alabama? Because I'm convinced.
I mean, President Trump said it at the White House.
After the fact.
Yeah.
After the fact. But I'm convinced, had Trump phoned to the folks in Alabama, the governor and such, the legislators and said, let's not do this, I am willing to put your tie on it, that they would have not passed that legislation.
So we have some new election results in my home state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and there are a couple of interesting things there. First of all, you had two very progressive prosecutors with taking out longtime incumbents. And these were in large Northern Virginia counties, important, significant areas. Neither one of these individuals has actually prosecuted a case in state court, but they ran on undoing mass incarceration and doing what they could as Commonwealth attorney to undermine system of mass incarceration. I mean, Antjuan, what did you make of those results?
Well, I don't live in Virginia, but here's what I can tell you by doing some Virginia politics is that people are hungry and thirsty for something different. And there was a time period, I think, in both Republican Party politics and Democratic Party politics where the more miles you had on your political engine, the more likely your car would go further down the political road. Now that is the opposite.
Right.
The newer the car, the lesser the miles, the more likely and the quicker you are to go down the road.
There's also a change in the lock 'em up attitude. I mean, look at Joe Biden back in the 90s, I mean, leading the charge, along with a lot of other Democrats, and that mindset has really changed.
Well, not only that, I think what this also says to presidential candidates that criminal justice reform in some places is on the top of the minds of voters, and that they, when they go to Virginia, obviously that this should be a top priority for them to talk about.
Well, Sarah, I'm curious to review on this because Nova voters in particular really are a good bellwether for the suburban Democratic white voter.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting to me that they are going down this more progressive road because to me they seem as more of a Joe Biden like supporter. And I'm not sure if you can reconcile these results with what we're seeing in the rest of the country.
Right.
Interesting.
So I think the big takeaway here is that Virginia is basically a microcosm for the rest of the country.
Right.
I mean, especially for progressive Democrats. We're so close to DC. George Soros put $1 million in. What is that going to say? I mean, obviously the politics are going to be skewed in one way or another. And just look at the distribution for the Washington Post. How many people in the DMV area especially would be active in politics because they have so much access to it. So I just think that is really, really prevalent for these progressive things. They see the action close to the, close to DC, and it's moving it forward.
Well, and I think Sarah makes a good point about the Soros money. Republicans have long focused their time, money, and attention on local races because they matter. Are Democrats finally figuring that out?
Well, I think we figured that out in 2016. I think we figured out that you build a house from the bottom up, not from the top down. And I've always told people that the closer your government is to you, the more important it is for you. But going back to the Virginia results, I also think that this is a lesson for candidates across the country. Activists tend to turn out more in primaries, more so than people who turn out in a general election.
This was especially these are off year.
Absolutely.
There were not a lot of people when I went to vote yesterday.
The people who show up in these type elections are the ones who have their finger on the Twitter political pulse every single day. They're the ones reading. They're the ones tweeting, and so that is a different group of people than people who show up in a presidential year, general election campaign, or presidential preference primary. And so I also think that that is the big takeaway from the Virginia elections.
Well, to that point, we have some new 2016 numbers, some head-to-head matchups for President Trump, which don't look particularly good. 53-40 with Joe Biden, for 2020, sorry. 51-42, 49-41 for Kamala Harris, 49-42 for Elizabeth Warren, and 47-42 for Pete Buttigieg. Again, with all the usual caveats, margin of error, it's early
national
and
poll,
it's national
not
poll,
electoral,
etc. What does this tell us, Antjuan, about the Democratic chances, given that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders have such a higher number than some of the other candidates?
It tells us that we should press the ignore and the chill button as it relates to this poll. Because, listen, I worked for Hillary in 2008, and I worked for her in South Carolina in 2016. There's no education in the second kick of the mule. We've seen polls go up. We've seen polls go down. We do not even have a nominee to this point. We do not know who the ticket will be, and we do not know what the temperature and the mood of the country will become fall at post Labor Day of 2020. And so to this point, it really doesn't matter. What it says for Democrats that we have to be laser focused on the things that really matter to our voters so that we can continue these trends going forward and have the opportunity to win in places in 2020 that we did not win in 2016.
Sarah, is this a warning sign for the president, though? I mean, you look at these numbers, and Antjuan is accurate and also being very charitable here, but you're not getting over 42% against any of these candidates.
So I think the big problem is that this is just grossly premature. So look at 2016. The numbers were completely in Hillary's favor at that point. We cannot just take a step and say this is what's going to happen. And obviously we need confidence from the Republican side to keep moving forward. We can't just be stagnant, and Iowa is not a reflection on the rest of the country. So to hyper-focus on these numbers in Iowa, it just doesn't make any sense.
And the Trump campaign won't want to say this, but the truth is Trump didn't win the national vote in 2016, and it's not necessarily a national vote strategy this time. It's an electoral college strategy. So the national matchups at a 42% might actually be enough. Bill Clinton won the Oval Office with only 43%
You'd need a third
of the popular vote.
You'd need a third-party candidate, though, to win with 43%.
You would, but if you have 43% nationally, but you're flirting with that 50 line and just enough of the battleground states, that can take you right back to the Oval.
Well, there's a bigger lesson in this poll for us as Democrats, is that united we can win, divided we will fail generations. And no matter who our nominee is, if we're not lockstep behind that person and willing to put it all on the line to ensure that we occupy that temporary public housing unit called the White House, then we are going to be in big trouble. And these numbers this early, or those numbers that late, will not matter.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Lack of democratic enthusiasm pretty much cost Hillary the White House in 2016.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I think the lack of being united behind Hillary Clinton and with the help of Russia for President Trump, I think that was a big reason why Hillary Clinton did not come across the finish line first as it relates to the Electoral College. We all know she won the popular vote.
Very interesting stuff, Antjuan and Sarah. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Coming up, if the dramatic death of Kim Jong-un's brother did not have enough spy novel elements, new reporting claims he may actually have been a CIA informant.
And you come to Chernobyl for the history, you stay for the scenery. We'll explain that one before we go.